Well, Charlotte, good evening. It's wonderful to meet you. Thank you very much for agreeing to answer our questions. I have several questions been given to us by members of the public and the people who love the Howdenshire Music Project. Mm-hmm. And the first one is an obvious one, I suppose. What brought you to music?
So I was surrounded from a very young age by music in my household. So both my mum and my dad are musicians. My mum, who some of you might have met at the Howden concert that we did last year, she plays the piano and she accompanies me for all of my concerts. And she also plays the Scottish harp called the clarsach. And my dad is an amateur musician and he plays the piano and also the accordion. So we've got so much variety in our household. So even at that young age, I think I was always quite inspired to join in with music. And when I was 3.5, my mum phoned up one of her colleagues, a local violin teacher called Jennifer Wilmer, who agreed to take me on. And I think I was probably the youngest pupil she had ever had. So she was a little bit wary of taking somebody on at 3.5. So we did it on a trial basis, but we got on so well together. And even now I have so many good memories of the lessons, that some of the very, very first lessons that I had with her. And she was so imaginative in her teaching. And I remember always being so eager to get finished with one book and on to the next book, and always sort of wanting to keep practicing. And I'm so thankful to her, because she instilled that from such a young age, right from the very beginning, and making it both enjoyable and making sure that I was practicing and motivating and developing.
Well, that's wonderful. What violins do you play, or who made the violins that you play?
The one that I'm playing at the moment is, I can hold it up for you and show everybody. It's a modern German violin, and it's by a violin maker called Fridolin Rusch. I got this in 2005 when I was 14, and it was only 6 months old at the time, so it's a very new violin. And very fortunately, I got to get to know the maker, Fridolin, and we went to visit him in his workshop. He's in Memmingen in the Bavarian Alps, and it was fascinating going to see his workshop. And he was telling me that the wood that made the violin, he had bought the tree about 25 years previously. He'd gone into this forest down a mountain track in the Bavarian Alps and bought this tree, and it had laid for 25 years in his workshop before he started to cut the wood and craft it into a violin. And because it was a new violin when I got it, it's really been amazing to play it over the past 13 years and sort of be witness to how the sound has developed and changed. And even now I'm still sort of discovering lots of new sounds and new textures, which is really, really special.
Well, that's amazing to actually know the tree as well. Why did you choose the violin?
So I think it's got two different ways to interpret that question. Why did I choose the violin in general? I think my mum, when I was very young and still possibly in my pram, I was sitting in her lessons. So she had piano pupils and she also had violin pupils that she taught in the house. And I would probably sit in my pram during the lessons and be very disruptive. And I think I was especially disruptive for the violin lessons and sort of wanting to join in and wanting to do what her pupils were. So I think that's why the violin was the instrument of choice. As for why was it this violin that I chose, when I was about 13 and I was with my teacher in Glasgow, I was at a point of needing a better quality instrument that would sort of help me to tackle the more advanced repertoire. And because getting a new violin is quite a long process to try different ones out, she very kindly at the time offered me on loan her violin, which was a Fridolin Rusch. So I had this violin on loan and sort of treated it with such care, because it was my teacher's violin. But I loved the sound of it so much, and I enjoyed playing on it. And a few months later, Fridolin himself, he came to London to the Violin Makers exhibition. So I got I got the chance to go down and try out some of his other violins.
Well, that's lovely. You studied at the Peabody Institute in the United States. What influenced your decision to study abroad, and what was it like?
So between the ages of 10 and 16, I studied in Glasgow with a lady called Jerry Gibson, and she was American, and she had herself studied at the Juilliard School in New York, and she was a pupil of Ivan Galamian. And Ivan Galamian, along with Dorothy DeLay, they were the two great pillars of violin teachers in the 20th century. And their pupil list reads like a who's who in the violin history of Itzhak Perlman, Zuckerman, Sarah Chang, Kung Ma Chung. So Jerry herself was a pupil of Galamian, and through that she taught me the so-called American style of violin playing that Galamian had developed. And when I was 16, she felt that it would be the right path for the continuity to my technique, to the concerto repertoire I was working on, that I looked to the States, to America, to some of the music colleges there to apply to them. And I remember when I was 16 and I got the opportunity to go out and audition in person in Baltimore at the Peabody Conservatory, and it was one of the scariest musical experiences I think I've ever had. I had to go in front of this big panel of violin professors, and I had to play a Paganini Caprice and a Bach partita and the entire Dvorak concerto. And I remember coming home and just feeling so sort of deflated and thinking I would have had no chance whatsoever to be even taken seriously. When lo and behold, I actually got accepted. And I remember at the time being so excited and so amazed that I would have the chance to study abroad at this conservatory. And my teacher at Peabody, she was called Violaine Melanson, and she was such a formidable influence on the development of my playing, not just learning the violin, but in my whole approach to what it meant to be a musician, what it meant to be a violinist, what it meant to be an artist. And she was both a performer and a teacher herself. And I remember whenever I saw her perform live, she was always so immersed completely, 100% body and soul in her performance. And so it was when she taught as well. She was exactly the same, so immersed and committed. And it was an amazing experience having the opportunity to work with her. And she really changed me and my outlook in how I viewed music, from somebody before that had probably played along quite happily without maybe much instinct of what was actually going on, but just playing and enjoying playing. And she really changed me into somebody that became far more conscious of what the composer was saying and how to express that in the most sincere and honest way possible, by both being true to the composer's voice, but also going your own individual way and having your own interpretation. And in that, she gave me so many tools to be able to develop that, but also the sort of freedom to go down that path and begin looking at that. But when I was in America, it was a fantastic experience. I come from a very, very small village in central Scotland that has a very small population, and I think it was an enormous culture change going from this tiny little village, surrounded by greenery and fields and hills, to a very sort of big downtown American city. But it was something that I, at my 16 years, sort of readily embraced with a sense of adventure. And it was really wonderful to have that chance to work alongside other students of my age, who were, it was such a privilege to really play along with them in orchestras, and study alongside them in music classes. It was a fantastic experience.
And who is your favourite violinist?
That's a difficult one because I have so many. I'm always sort of developing with who I listen to, I'm always drawn to violinists of the 20th century, that golden age of violinists, Heifetz, Kreisler, Oistrakh, Milstein, Enescu. These were violinists who were so unique in their sound and the colours that they could produce. George Enescu, for example, he had a range of slides, and you can hear it in their sound. You only need to listen to them for 10 seconds and you can define them with the quality of their sound and the textures that they produce. What was also wonderful about them is the way that they extended the violin repertoire and the way that they made concert programs. They had so much variety, they had so much style in their concert programs, and particularly Heifetz and Milstein, Kreisler, they were wonderful at championing new composers. And also Kreisler, who wrote so many now treasured pieces for the violin, tambourine chinoise, so many of the Viennese classics, and they were wonderful at expanding that repertoire that now all violinists really enjoy playing nowadays.
And who's inspired you most, and what has been a seminal experience for you?
I think all of my violin teachers, from the very beginning, the three of them that I've studied with, they've all very much inspired me and motivated me to keep going and keep practicing. But I think it was when I was in my early teens, when I was with Jerry in Glasgow, that she changed me from somebody that enjoyed playing and gave me the confidence to want to take it further, to want to go to music college and to try and sort of do it as a career. And I think this was mainly due to her teaching. She was so encouraging and gave me so much freedom in my playing. I don't remember any time at all in the 6 years that I was studied with her where she ever once said that I hadn't practiced or I had played badly. And I know for a fact I played badly many, many times in her lessons, but she never once mentioned this. She always had words of encouragement and words of enhancement that added to my playing rather than take away. And I remember one occasion where I think I was about 12 or 13 and I was playing the Bach saraband from a partita, and I played it all the way through with all the chords. And all she said to me at the end, she said, "Sweetie, that was just wonderful. Now go home and make it your own." And I remember sort of being 12 or 13, being so puzzled by this statement. You know, I had wanted her to say, play this chord this way, play these phrases that way. And she said nothing like that. She just sent me home and she said, make it your own. And for me, that was a very sort of groundbreaking moment in being given that freedom to go home and be individual, look at the music, study the music, and make it your own, have your own voice in it. And rather than being spoon-fed all the time into saying, do this one way or do this another. And I always remember that lesson very clearly in my head.
And what do you like most about your work as a musician?
I like having the balance that I have in my job. I'm extremely privileged to be able to do music for a career, something that I love and something that I'm very passionate about. But the balance in my life is something that I very much enjoy. So I do concerts, but I also teach full-time at 4 schools in and around Cambridge. So I have a staggering range of pupils from 6-year-olds to 20-year-olds, all at varying stages of the violin journey. And I think it's so motivating for me. Every week I go in and I teach all these different students, and I'm always so amazed at how committed they are to learning the instrument and how much they seem to enjoy playing the violin, how they enjoy interacting with other people whilst playing, whether in orchestras or chamber groups, their sense of always wanting to achieve, going on to the next grade. And even from my very youngest, who's probably only 6, their sense of discipline in that to achieve something you have to practice and you have to work at it to get better. And that very much inspires me in my own practice. When I go in during the week and I see all my students doing that themselves, it's very nice to see.
And you've performed all over the UK, mainland Europe, North America. What has been your favourite performing experience, and where has your favourite place been?
I think one of the memorable ones, or one of the more recent memorable ones, was in December last year, and I was invited to go to Germany and play for the Christmas Eve midnight mass service at 11:30 at night. And it was in a town called Garmisch-Partenkirchen, which it's a famous ski resort just on the border with Austria. And in Garmisch they have this magnificent church, all in the Baroque style. And this was where the midnight mass was taking place, and it was an amazing experience to play here. And I was playing solo Bach, which was so fitting for this Baroque church with all the beautiful frescoes. The only thing with the concert though, I had to play from the top of the church, from the organ loft, which was right at the top of the church, and it was only reachable. You had to climb up a very rickety ladder outside the church to get to it, and it had the most ridiculous dizzying drop down to the ground, and I had to play here sort of boxed in an entire Bach solo sonata, and I was so frightened of the drop, of falling over, but it was wonderful to play Bach in that environment, and also take my violin home, because the wood of the violin that I mentioned earlier came from the forests around Garmisch. And I think my favourite place to play is way back in my childhood, when I was 12 or 13, and it was my very first tour with the National Youth Orchestra of Scotland. And I remember being so excited because we were playing Shostakovich's 10th Symphony. And I had never heard anything like it in my life before, when given the opportunity to play this symphony. And it was just a colossal piece of music. And so I would encourage anybody that's not heard it to go away and listen to it, because it was, for me as a 12-year-old, it was just staggering. So that was amazing. But then on top of that, we got to do this European tour, and we ended up playing in the Concertgebouw in Amsterdam. And then we went on and played in the Concert House in Berlin. And these were two of the world famous concert venues. And I think to have that experience from that age to be allowed into the concert halls and actually play in them was an amazing memory that I'll always have of these two venues.
And what memorable responses have you had to your performances?
I think all of my concerts have memorable responses. I think one that was very special was it was last year, and I was asked to be the artist in residence for Wetherby Arts Festival, and I was asked to play the Bruch Concerto with Leeds Symphony Orchestra and the conductor Martin Binks. And it was very sad, because Martin at that time was very ill, and he conducted the concert, and he sadly passed away not many months after the concert, and it was the last performance that he was ever at. We only worked once together. We had one rehearsal to put the concerto together, but at the rehearsal and at the concert, it was so wonderful to see the way he worked with the orchestra. He was so sensitive to working with me, to balancing the orchestra, keeping everybody happy, doing what they were doing, and he kept this amazing teamwork going between the orchestra and me and himself, and that, as a soloist, made me feel very reassured playing a concerto. But also I think the audience sensed that as well in the performance, and they were very spontaneous and very, very appreciative in their response afterwards.
Has the way you practice changed over time, and how many hours do you put into practice at the moment?
I think I try to always practice daily, and usually several hours. But I have never viewed, and I got my parents to verify this, I have never viewed practice as a chore. And I was never sent off to do my practice at any stage. I always wanted to do it. I always wanted to develop and improve. Practicing's never easy, or it shouldn't always be easy. You have to be very focused. You have to be very alert. You have to always be listening and make sure you practice the bits that need practiced and not just play the bits you enjoy. And that can sometimes be a difficult thing to have to force yourself to do. But I always enjoy it, and I always enjoy discovering new things, playing. I take a little bit of time off in the summer. I take 2 weeks off every year in the summer when I go on holiday, and the violin doesn't come with me. It gets left at home. But it's always very nice to come back after the 2 weeks, and you often find that playing has actually improved in that absence. So it's sometimes nice to come back and you feel far more refreshed.
Do you have a dream project?
I think dream projects would probably be doing more concerts and playing more repertoire and bringing concerts to more people, and bringing concerts to people that might not have thought of going to a classical music concert, trying to make it more accessible and reach a wider spectrum of people, I think would be really nice. I think regarding teaching dream projects, I think I do a lot of teaching at the moment, but when I was a child, I was very inspired by a lady called, there was a documentary on the television, a lady called Roberta Gaspari, and she lived in New York, and she taught violin in a lot of the inner city schools in Harlem in New York. And she really fought so much to give these children the opportunity to learn an instrument that otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to learn an instrument. And I think it is so important that children learn an instrument and have that opportunity, because every child can play an instrument. They have that within them. And I think it's very important that we actively all try to pursue that and give these children a chance to play an instrument, because they can gain so much enjoyment. So it's so good for well-being, for learning and discipline. And I think in the future, that is something that I would actively want to pursue more, is giving every child the chance to be able to learn an instrument in that way.
This is a specialist question from Jeff and Margaret. And they ask, are you familiar with the music of the 19th century Norwegian virtuoso violinist and composer Ole Bull?
Yes, he lived along the same time as other violinistic virtuosos as Ernst, Wieniawski, Vieuxtemps, and Paganini. And he was, even according to Schumann, better than Paganini. So he must have been a staggering violinist. He lived around the sort of 1800s, and as well as giving thousands and thousands of concerts, he composed a lot, very much in the style of Norwegian nationalistic style. So I have here a very little piece that he has written, that I will play a very short excerpt of. It's called La Mélancolie, in Moments of Solitude.
That was
volleyball.
that was beautiful, Charlotte. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Hopefully, you're coming to Howden in September to come and play for us, and we'll see what we're going to hear then. How do you see the role of the artist and musician in society?
I think that the role of being a violinist or being a musician has evolved significantly over time. I think that musicians now have a far more patchwork approach to learning an instrument and playing professionally. I think people now are far more aware of their audience. There's a lot more audience interaction, and people do teaching, people play chamber music, people have a solo career, and that's all entwined, and people can pick and choose all these options and do them at the same time now. I think also that classical music has also changed very much in the past few years. I think it's never been more popular. I think people now turn to classical music, and it's got almost a trend now as people turn to it as a form of unwinding, seeking it maybe as a form of escapism. It seems to set a mood of being very calm and tranquil. I think Smooth Classics on Classic FM is probably one of the most popular shows at the moment. And that's wonderful that people are turning to that for that mood. I think what's also important for musicians and perhaps our role is that we keep challenging music and we keep bringing that music to people. I think nowadays people are more reluctant to be challenged in music, and I think maybe it's our job to bring more music to them and show them how many emotions can be in music. Not just the escapism and the calmness, but every emotion, every opinion can be expressed in music. It's very powerful, and I think our role as musicians is to do that, to challenge music, to question it, and to bring it to more people. I think is something we can do as our job.
And sometimes the artistic life can be lonely. Do you ever find it's lonely? And if so, how do you counteract that?
Yeah, I think for every profession, whether you're an artist or a writer, a sports person, I think we all need time alone to develop, time to think, time to create. And you can only do that being on your own. I think there's no escaping the fact that the dedication and the commitment needed to be a professional, whether if you're a violinist or you play the piano, to do that professionally is a journey that is lonely and that only you can go on. At the end of the day, we spend hours and hours alone practicing, usually obsessively in a practice room, and we are our best judges at our progress. Every day we go into the practice room and we monitor these minuscule developments, and our ears become so finely tuned to what we're doing and what works for us. For me, I enjoy the solitude. I find I need time and space to be creative, and to try out new things and experiment with things, and to think about what the composer's saying or how I can express that in the best way. Teaching is definitely not lonely. It's sort of a very social interaction with my pupils, and I'm always trying to find better ways to communicate with pupils, trying to say things in different ways for every child. Everybody learns differently. So that's sort of very social and communicative that way.
And do you compose? Have you composed anything?
No, it's not a road that I've gone down. I think when I was at college, part of our theory classes, we had several assignments. We had to go away and compose a fugue, compose a 12-tone composition in the vein of Schoenberg, that I usually had to spend hours and hours sort of struggling over. to make any sort of sense out of it. But they were all very worthwhile tasks, I think, in learning how to construct fugues and construct 12 tones. But I haven't gone down the composer route.
So when you're not playing, what do you do? What do you enjoy doing?
I enjoy learning languages. I have a boyfriend who is Austrian. He comes from the Steiermark. So I'm always trying to improve my German so that I can speak better to him. He's also introduced me rather bravely to Langlaufen, which is cross-country skiing. So this is slightly less dangerous for violinists than the downhill version, but I have next to no balance. So it's I usually spend much of my time on the ground picking myself up rather than sort of progressing onwards. But when we do the Langlaufen in Germany and Austria, and they're wonderful stretches of flat snow that you can glide upon, and you usually don't have to go too far before you get to a lovely Gasthof and a restaurant, and you get lovely Apfelstrudel and sort of, it's very gemütlich and cozy at these places.
And I'm told you like to cook, to bake, and so on. What food inspires you?
I think when I was a child, I was notoriously fussy at eating and probably just lived off bland pasta. Now I have thankfully matured, and I now enjoy a range of cuisines and a range of different foods. I like baking bread. I wouldn't say I'm any good at it, but I think it's important to learn the art of patience that baking bread definitely provides. And there is nothing quite like the smell of newly baked bread. I think it's very important when you're anybody, but when you're an artist or a sports person, to eat well and to eat healthily. So I enjoy eating lots of fruit and vegetables. Somebody at college once told me that playing the violin burned 700 calories an hour. To me, that seems very exaggerated and not quite believable. But I can see their point, because playing the violin is a very, deceptively, very physical task, because you're moving so many different parts of your body, and you do burn a lot of calories, I guess, when you're playing. And I think it is very important that to eat well and to eat healthily, and to spend time away from practice routines, to actually take the time to cook and to eat as well is important.
Well, thank you. Is there anything you dislike about the music world?
I think over the past 10 years, the way that we listen to music has changed significantly. I think in the past, CDs for classical music were always relegated to the back shelves of your local music store. And I think now we have, at the touch of a button on the internet, a staggering array of classical music. You can listen to Kreisler, you can listen to Rachmaninoff playing live, you get live concerts from the Berlin Philharmonic, and it's all there, and it's also accessible for everybody. And what I would maybe question nowadays is, are live concerts, are these accessible in the same way that music on the internet is? Are we doing enough as musicians to make concerts accessible? Are we embracing enough music? We need to, I think, champion more composers, more modern composers that have been neglected in the past. I think it would be great if our recitals weren't limited to playing sonatas. I think there's a staggering variety of pieces out there, shorter pieces that are very accessible to everybody. And I think it's a real shame if recitals have to work within a set framework, when we can embrace more music, we can champion new composers, and it gives us so much more to offer to everybody. We needn't be afraid of modern music. I think there's often a misconception that anything classical written in the 20th century or 21st is off limits and very challenging on the ear. And I think it's our job as musicians to kind of turn the table on that a little bit and provide a pathway into modern music. And to illustrate my point, I'm going to play another little snippet. This time it's by a Polish composer called Grażyna Bacewicz, and she lived from 1909 to 1969. And she is one of a few female composers to have achieved international recognition. And this is her Polish Caprice.
Thank you very much. Again, beautiful. And I can imagine I was in Poland. How do you see the role of arts funding, and what impact does it have on music and musicians?
I think it's vital that we provide concerts to everybody, and everybody has access to these concerts at an affordable cost for everybody. Music is so powerful, and it breaks down so many barriers. It goes further than any language, because it speaks the language of everybody. And I think it's so important to offer that to everybody and give everybody the chance to come and hear live music. I think what's also very important is that we keep working to maintain a sense of community in our areas, and we do that through music. Something like the Howden lunchtime series that you have there, also in Boston Spa, they are wonderful because they're at lunchtime and people can come out and meet other people. There's a bit of social interaction, and they get the chance to listen to concerts. And I think these are wonderful series that need supporting. I think also with regard to funding is that we need more funding in schools to develop pupils' talent, to develop children's talent, and to give them the chance to take further the skills that they have more orchestras for them, have them playing in chamber groups, give them the chance to go on chamber music courses. If somebody has talent or somebody has the skills or the potential, then they should be given that chance to take it further and not be limited just because they come from a certain area or they don't have access to these things, that they should be denied the chance. I think everybody should have that chance to go further, to take their interests further. And I think regarding the funding, I think there can definitely be more in place there to support children, because that's not just our next generation of musicians. It's a vital part of that child's education in having access to music and access to all those wonderful, wonderful things.
Well, thank you. Let's hope the government's listening. What's the best piece of advice do you think you've ever been given?
I think that my mum usually has very good pieces of advice. And I think one of the things she's always said to me is that what's meant for you won't pass you by. And I remember along all my childhood and career that there have been many disappointments. You know, you do a competition and you don't win and you're feeling very upset. But I think it's very important to learn from these experiences, even if you didn't win or you didn't achieve what you wanted, that there is always something to be gained from them and something to be learned. And then just learn about it and move on and forget about the whatever disappointment happened and look on to the future, onto the next opportunity. And that's something that has always sort of kept me going throughout.
And what advice would you give to a young musician?
Keep practicing. Keep practicing, keep motivated, be inspired. Because music is a great companion, and music will stick with you for your whole life. When you go through life, when you go to university, when you're working, if you stick with music at the beginning, music will be there with you throughout. And it can give so many opportunities. You can play with other people, you can meet other people through music. And it is a great source not only of enjoyment, but a sense of comfort and solace. You can almost pick up a violin or play a piano, and it can help your mood. It can change the way you feel about things, and it will always be with you. It will never, it's like riding a bike. You never forget how to play. It will always be within you. So that's what I would say to young people, and keep at it, even when it's difficult, when you have exams to do, when you have GCSEs or A-levels. Always take time out to look at your instrument. And I know that from personal experience from my own pupils. When I get them to year 11 and year 13 and they're swamped with exam pressure, they often find that taking a little bit of time out in the revision to play their instrument, even for 10 minutes, does a world of good. And they can go back to their exam work feeling happier and more refreshed as well.
Well, Charlotte, thank you very much. Here in the Howdenshire Music Project, we're very excited to have musicians like yourself and others, and hopefully you'll come along to our lunchtime free concert, and it's something that we want to carry on doing. But thank you very much.
Not at all. Thank you so much.